On the jig, sir. It's all right. Yes, it does. It helps the cause.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening, guys.
Before we get too far, I saw Paul laughing in the background because he made a meme of me grunting when I set the hook set, and it's just on repeat. So
yeah, if you guys want the edited one, just DM me.
I feel like that should just go on the community hole at this point as an intro. You got to do the little snapback meme.
Oh dear, too many memes. I feel like you should introduce him, Joseph.
I probably should, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I dragged somebody in, courtesy of a good friend of mine here, Mr. Jacob. Wanted to do a little bit different of a show today because I know, at least my background being a fly fisherman, I grew up making lures my entire life. And now when I do bass fishing, it's always something that I've been interested in. And of course, it's not the same as picking up a vise and tying a bunch of flies. You got to have a lot of equipment. So I tried to find some small shops to support and ended up finding Mr. Jacob here. And we've kind of been friends since and go fishing together and hang out. And whenever I need stuff or want to do something silly like make punch skirt hubs, this is the man I go to. He does it all. Anything and everything you could ever think of, he's the man for it. But thanks, Jacob, for being here and giving us some time and letting us pick your brain. And you know, for any of you who are curious, he's got a YouTube and he does quite a bit of content on making lures. So if you're curious to see it firsthand, he's got a great YouTube to check out, pigments and pouring soft plastics and all that stuff. But we're gonna pick his brain a bit and get you all started in being a garage junkie. Although his shop now is pretty sophisticated, a little bit of a step up.
It's a work in progress still. We're getting there. But yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
I mean, I guess the first question I've got for you is, how did you get started in making baits? What made you want to do that? And how long have you been doing it?
Gary Yamamoto is the reason I started, because I was tired of spending, I don't know, what is it, $8-9 a pack for Senkos. So I was talking to a guy that I worked with, and he was like, yeah, it can't be that hard. So I got on YouTube, I looked up how to make a stick bait, and then it just went from there. I think I said I was going to start with like a $500 investment. I was like, that's it. I'm just going to buy one mold, an injector, a few colors, glitters, and then it's just spiraled out of control from there. But yeah, no, it was like almost like an instant connection, I guess you'd call it. It was very therapeutic. Like I just said, I started with a stick bait mold, and I had something else. I don't remember what it was. And just standing out in the garage making baits, and yeah, it was just really relaxing, and it's just kind of grown from there. But yeah, I can give Gary Yamamoto the credit for starting.
They catch fish, damn it, though.
They do,
They
and
do?
I'm not
Yeah.
saying, and I'll never say that like I can make a bait just as good as his, because I still keep a couple pack of Yamamotos with
I've
me.
seen them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. When all else fails, go back to the OG just to see what's going on.
Yeah.
mhm,
There's just
Yeah.
like something in the way that it falls, you know, like when you look at all
Mhm.
the stick baits on the market, like they'll do different things, but Yamamoto's like vibrates about itself, you know, it
Mhm.
like has a shimmy that's like almost unmatchable. But I agree. You get on a good, you know, weightless Texas Senko bite, and that's $15 in like 3 hours, if that.
Yep.
It's like 2 fish if you're lucky on a Senko.
Yep.
Very much
Yeah.
so.
Even sniff
So-
it sometimes and it's gone.
I have casted them off of the, like if I was using a wacky rig or something, trying to skip it under a dock and cast it right off underneath it.
Yeah. That happens plenty of time. Even on a wacky hook, sometimes it just
Yep.
comes right out of the O-ring and it just shoots and it's
Yep.
gone.
Yeah, I'll make a cast and I'm like, man, that was a really good cast. And my hook's right in front of me and the bait was up underneath it.
I have another one for you, sir. Have
Yep.
you, because I know you just moved to your shop, so not a lot of
Mhm.
people know this. He used to be a California native, sort of transplant
Sort of.
native. And he just kind of bought his forever home in Arkansas, right?
Missouri. I'm like 15 minutes from Arkansas, but yeah, right in the
Gotcha.
edge of Missouri.
Nice.
Yep.
So since you've probably done it, you've had to take inventory to move. Do you know how many molds you have in total of soft plastics and lead
I
from
don't.
to start to now?
No, I was actually thinking about counting, going out there and counting before this, but no, because I moved all that myself, so I didn't have to worry about counting it before the moving company did it. Because all the stuff like that, I moved myself. I didn't really trust the moving company, so yeah, but no, I don't know how many molds I have, to be honest.
Well, I can tell you that I've bought like 30 soft plastics from him that are all different. So
Yeah.
So I have a question here because
Mhm.
what is your preferred mold style? Because you have your aluminum molds and then you also have your silicone molds, and
hmm
I guess what's the difference? Because I mean, I used to make jigs, I should say,
hmm
first and foremost. Just like same reason, a jig
hmm
is $3, $4, $5 when I can make a bunch of jigs, buy football jig mold, spend the investment, make jigs for cheaper.
hmm
And if I break them off in a rock, I don't feel as bad. Yeah, it doesn't hurt my
Yep.
pocket as much.
Yeah.
So, what's the difference between your aluminum mold, your silicone mold, just the
cast
molds in
mold,
general? Yeah, cast molds.
stone
What's the
mold.
actual
Yeah.
difference? Yeah.
So silicone molds typically are just open pore molds, because trying to make an injection silicone mold is typically going to flash out and not work very well. So a silicone mold primarily are open pore, so that means one side of the bait is going to be flat. So if you want like a stick bait, you're going to have to inject into an aluminum mold. And then with your
Gotcha.
aluminum mold, you have cast aluminum and then CNC aluminum. And honestly, the only difference is visually. So the cast mold, it's going to look kind of dull in like the bait when you get it out, and then a CNC is going to look shiny. I personally don't think it makes a difference at all, other than you looking at it, because once they're in the water, they're all pretty much the same. So
Yeah.
just kind of the fit and finish. Some of the cast aluminum molds I have, they don't inject quite perfect, just because the tolerances aren't quite as tight as a CNC mold. So it's mostly just like the finish of the bait and being visually appealing. As far as like functionality, it's all the same, to be honest.
I think the
Yeah.
only one that you can't get away with a cast of is like your swim baits, right? So if you like pictured a cast Kitech, you're just not going to be able to get a Kitech's tail that thin and
Mhm.
have it come out. You know, that's the problem. It probably wouldn't fill, it'd get stuck with air if you tried to inject a cast Kitech mold versus a CNC'd. So it does have some function, and things like hula grubs and stuff you can inject once instead of having to have multiple separate molds when you do the CNC versus cast. But for the most
So-
part, There's another one too that nobody likes using. I bought one once and I will never touch it again, and that's stone. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
inject
No.
stone. Fuck that. No, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I
So
did the same
You can't
thing.
get it out. So basically, you inject it. It's
Mm.
single use, and then you ruin the bait. And I think you could probably do. Jacob put me on a tip of what was it? Engine enamel paint.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
could
people
probably.
use
Yeah. Go ahead.
they use the high heat engine enamel and they'll paint the inside of it. You either have to do that or you have to oil the stone between every single injection, and it's just super time consuming because it just kind of sticks to the mold. And I did the same thing. I bought one time and I'll never do it again.
So you guys kind of went over. I'm curious. So a Kitech would be an aluminum mold, aluminum CNC mold, right? To
To
injection
get a
mold.
good one.
Yeah.
To get a good
Yeah,
one.
to get a good basic, basically the thin
Yeah.
tail or say like a twin tail hula grip, same kind of deal. It would be an injected aluminum injected CNC mold, typically.
Yeah.
I would see not for Kitech because they're much bigger. They probably have a giant machine that just does all of them, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and so like Kitech's in particular, I bought a mold, I don't remember, a year and a half or so ago, and it's almost like a 3-piece mold because the way the tails vent, they have to vent out of the bottom, like kind of the side of the mold. So it's a 3-piece mold, and they're really expensive. Like so a standard swim bait mold, even in a CNC'd aluminum, you can get them for like 150 to 200 bucks. And then the one that I bought for the Kitech's, it's $500 just for one mold. So
Good Lord.
the prices go up a lot when you start getting into like very specific molds.
Yeah.
Good Lord.
And we'll talk about it a bit, but like lead pouring, I think for the most part are also aluminum, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they're
Usually
cast.
just cast aluminum.
Yeah.
When you start talking, again, gonna pick on Kitech because we talk about a Kitech tungsten jig, right? When you look at the sintering molds for making that Kitech M2, you're talking 10,000+ a mold to be able to handle the compressive forces to pack the tungsten powder into the head, and then they bake it afterwards to melt things like tin and lighter metals that melt really low temperature to actually hold the head together. Whereas when you're talking about making jigs like you've made before, Max, you can melt lead in a pot over a stove and pour it in, no problem.
Yeah.
And then it cools. It doesn't melt your hook or anything. Even if you could theoretically melt tungsten, which I don't know of very many places on the planet that can melt tungsten. You're talking like the internal of a sun to melt tungsten.
Yeah, it's some ridiculous number, isn't it? Isn't it like
It-
2,000 degrees Celsius or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like it's
not
almost
Fahrenheit,
like
Celsius.
about 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Versus lead melts at what, like 280 or something?
It's like
260?
it's 630 something, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, it's nowhere near comparable to tungsten.
So you couldn't just melt it in your garage. That's why you don't see a lot of
Yeah.
tungsten products in general, and you don't see a lot of them
Mhm.
from garage making, right? So like,
Yeah.
Jacob can make you pretty much anything. I don't even know what would be your favorite thing that you actually enjoy making. Is it still soft plastics, or do you like some of the lead stuff too?
It kind of comes and goes in waves. Like right now in the winter time, I kind of prefer the lead molds. I don't know why. It's just easier. I feel because with soft plastics, the temperature is everything, especially if you're trying to do 2 colors in a laminate, because the block that blends the 2 colors will freeze up on you, and it's a lot harder. So in the winter time, I make most of my lead stuff, and then the rest of the year, I'll just kind of do a mix of everything. But yeah, I would say the lead pouring is probably a little more enjoyable just because the molds you can modify without having to worry about messing them up. They're a lot cheaper. You can buy lead molds for, $45-50 depending on where you get them. And then, soft plastic molds are anywhere from $150 to, like I said, $500. So it's a little cheaper and a little more fun to customize on the lead side of things.
So with the soft plastic side, I'm gonna bring it back to soft plastic a little bit here because I'm looking for a big swimmer. That's in a big swim bait. Is it possible to make a big swim bait that will not float, right, but just sink slower, and I could creep it and just get the tail to kick? So almost kind of like a Maggraph style kind of swim bait that will, essentially not hover, right, but just stay in that mid, higher mid water column, and I can just barely turn the handle and just kind of bump it along, but the tail itself would still go. Would have to go with, what's your advice on that? I guess is the best way to say it. Make me a custom swim bait.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can, and that's the thing about soft plastics that's kind of cool. So some companies make floating blends of plastic, some make sinking blends, and then obviously you can add salt, and how much salt per cup you add will adjust like your sink rate. And then you have different firmness, or they call it durometer of plastic. So you have like a soft blend, medium, hard, salt water, and you can kind of mix and match and kind of fine tune it to whatever you're looking for. So in something like that, like if you were trying to be that specific, what I would do is if you found like a big swim bait mold, don't do anything fancy. Like just pour the plastic in, make it solid white just so it's easy to see. Play with your different ratios and try to get it to where like you get the action and the fall rate you're looking for, and then you can start building your color patterns from there. Because that's what I do is I'll just make just a solid white bait or even chartreuse, just something I can see if I'm trying to really fine tune it, and then get it dialed in to whatever ratio you want, and then start building colors from there.
And to go back to what Max is asking, I think with soft plastics, because we see all these garage makers, right? Like I'll pick on one who's tremendously successful, working class zero. The Tyrant, the Citizen, the Battle Shad, those are all, like Jacob was saying, open pore molds, right? And if Jacob wanted to spend however many hours carving something, he could definitely carve you a big swim bait and work out the nuances of getting the tail to swim correctly through iterative process. And we all could, quite frankly. It's really not that hard. I think those bigger swim baits are probably some of the easier to make at home, other than they take a lot of plastisol and you have to have a microwave and you can't steal your wife's measuring cup. You got to go to Walmart and buy your own. But you could definitely do it. The silicone's really not that expensive. You need a dedicated microwave, but those can be had for like $30, and you could go through that process, Max, if you really wanted to. But the hardest part when you start talking about making those swim baits yourself, if you're not using CAD, is symmetry. As Jacob can attest, because he's done it. I'm doing it right now. Keeping a bait symmetrical is hard by hand. Very hard by hand.
Attempted it. I wouldn't say I've successfully done it. But I tried making smaller swim baits. Like I think the ones that I tried carving, the biggest one was like 3 3.75, maybe 4 inches long. So getting the small swim baits to really swim good is, like I said, I attempted it. I wasn't successful, but the bigger ones are a little bit easier just because you have that bigger tail to kind of get the kick going a little bit easier. But yeah, making it symmetrical is very difficult.
Yeah, I hardly know what the word symmetrical means, so there's no way I'm going to be able to use CAD. I know what CAD is, but there's no way I'm going to be able to use CAD. I had a tough time learning what symmetrical means.
Yeah. But yeah,
Jacob.
I mean, you can realistically make them pretty cheap because, like he was saying, you just need silicone, and you can buy a 1 pound jar of silicone at Hobby Lobby for like $20. So to like make your own custom swim bait mold isn't really that expensive. It's just time consuming and refining everything and making sure that it actually swims the way you want.
Well, and then carving it. The carving it part is where most of us fail. Because being able to make a master is the hardest part. And like, you tip your hat to people like Andrew Hinkle or whoever who hand carves everything out of wood and makes it look perfect. Or another one, I don't know his first name. Is it Nick? Nick Marling? What's his
Nate.
Nate.
Yep.
Nate does it too, but he does it every
Mhm.
single time. You know, he
Yep.
carves a hand carved wooden bait every single episode, and they all look pretty epic.
Yeah.
Like that's incredible to me to have that
Mhm.
skill. I certainly don't. But sorry, anyway, Pooh, you had a question.
Oh no, I was just saying, Jacob, what do you offer? Just pretty much everything, like bladed jigs, soft plastics.
What do
Yeah.
you not have is the
Yeah.
question.
Yeah, actually, that's the better question.
Yeah. So what I don't have are like I don't airbrush crankbaits or jerk baits or anything. And mostly because I've ordered some custom painted jerk baits and crankbaits, and I just wasn't a big fan of the action. Because on stuff like that, you buy the blank, it
Mhm.
has the action it has. You have no control over it. All you have control over is the color pattern.
Right.
And I'm very picky with hard baits. I have spent way too much money on megabass lures, so I don't do airbrushing. But I do make pretty much everything outside of that. And then the only catch is when it comes to bladed jigs, I do make my own, but Z-Man's patents are very stringent. So like the blade being connected directly to the bait is what makes like the jackhammer so good.
Hmm.
But I can make those and I can give them away, but I can't sell them because
Gotcha.
Z-Man has that patented. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, we can, just send us the box.
Yeah.
We don't,
Well, it's
we,
funny you
yeah.
say that. There is I can't remember the name of them, and I wouldn't say it if I could because I don't want to, dime them out. But there's a
Yeah.
company that sells them, and they just call it a customizable jig. So they give you the jig with the hook eye still bent open enough, and then the
Mhm.
blade in the box, and you just slide it on and crimp it down.
Hmm.
So there's ways people have tried to get around that, but
You
I
can
don't.
still kind of get in trouble for that, but that's the hard one. You can get other ones, like the
Mhm.
Copperhead. I'll pick on
Yeah.
that
Yep.
one because you've seen it.
Mhm.
You can make that at home anytime you want. It's just a split ring, and it's a different action. And like honestly, I'm kind of sad because I have fished a lot of there's a specific mold that I'll reference here for some of you who don't know it. It's the Do It Poison Tail, I think is what it's called.
Mhm.
And that's their swim jig head, right? But if you open up the eye and you get your hands on, one of those 5-sided coffin style blades and put it on that head, it's one of my favorite grass blade baits. They're bladed baits.
Yep.
What, Max?
Yeah.
What?
Sorry. I just had a thought. Boy, looks like a skinny Bobby Lee. Sorry.
Anorexic Bobby Lee.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that coffin shaped blade because they actually have that patented as well. So the shape of the blade, you're supposed to use the ones that are kind of rounded on the top. So Z-Man, from my understanding, they have 3 different things you have to watch for, and that's the direct connected blade to the jig, the coffin shaped bill, and then you can't use the word chatter if you're selling it. So those are the 3 things, and they go after people pretty seriously. Like even somebody like me, who's essentially a nobody in the fishing world, if they saw that I was trying to sell that, they would immediately send me a cease and desist letter. Like they're pretty serious about it.
Good Lord.
Yeah, I've heard rumors that the patent just expired and they might not be renewing it, but I just don't even mess with that side of things.
Well, I mean, when you have a product that has won so much money on it, it's kind of
Mhm.
hard to not, take full
One-
force of it.
And you have the entire U.S. market coined is the other thing. Like, because you can still
Yeah.
get them. I don't have any with me, but Taz, I don't know if he's still on or not, but
The tungsten ones.
no, he's got the oh shit, I'm blanking on the name of that company. OSP makes a direct connect vibrating jig that has a coffin build, but there are no rules on it in Japan, right? So even though the Evergreen collab is a thing, it's not patented in Japan. It's treated more like a spinnerbait is treated here. So there's like five or six of them that make almost an identical version of the jackhammer, but all slightly different. OSP's one, Beeline's another one. Obviously, Evergreen makes their jackhammer there. But yeah, so you can still get them. They cost an arm and a leg to be shipped over here. So it's just not worth it. You just end up buying a jackhammer if you want a jackhammer, or you buy now. Z-Man ripped off their own patent with Evergreen for the Evo, I think is what it is. And it's all right too. But it's still different than, like I said, that poison tail head shape. Like, you know, we fish the Delta a lot. All of us here have fished the Delta a lot. You know, sometimes that jackhammer head just fouls up. You can't get out. You know, you get like that perfect piece of hydrilla that gets stuck right over the blade and kills it. And that's it. You're done on that cast. But the poison tail just pulls right through. And if you pop it once, that grass will fall off one side or the other because it's so narrow. But it still produces a pretty on par to almost on par vibration with a jackhammer. Doesn't start quite as fast, but it feels about the same in the water.
So with you making custom baits, Jacob, what's the funnest thing about it for you? As in, you know, there's a ton of baits out on the market, right? And what's the biggest thing that you like tweaking yourself? You know, because there's always, you can always tweak colors, of course, to get that certain color pattern. You know, tweak the salts and tweak the plastics so it falls slower, you know, sinks faster, the whole entire bit. What's the funnest part about it for you?
I think it's just so, like, how many times have you found a bait that came out or whatever, new bait that comes out, and you look at it and you're like, that's awesome, but they only made it in this size or this color or whatever. But just having the ability to do literally whatever you want is like the ultimate, like, fisherman's dream. Because and I think you have a little bit more control on the lead side of things because you can put whatever hook you want in there. You can adjust what firmness of weed guard you put. And then, like, I mix a ton of like custom powder coat colors. It's all probably unnecessary, but it makes you feel good. And so like, how much of fishing is confidence? Like, if you don't have confidence in what you're throwing, you're probably not having that much fun. And I know, like, for me, I'll use like giant swim baits and glide baits for an example. I don't have a ton of confidence in them, so I know when I am trying to fish them, I'm probably not doing it correctly because I start to get irritated and I'm like, okay, I'm getting followers, they won't commit, what's going on? So like, if you can make something that is exactly what you want, you just have so much more confidence, and I feel like that forces you to kind of slow down and actually fish it the way you're supposed to, which in turn could lead to, I feel like it leads to like more fun and more production.
No, that's fair. I totally get it.
Yep.
Yeah. I totally get it. That being said, spinner baits. I've never made spinner baits. I'm not a big spinner bait guy. Pua and Joseph's probably more of a spinner bait angler than I am. What do you do on a spinner bait? I'm assuming you make spinner baits because you know you have lead modes and all. Any tricks on a spinner bait that you don't see on the market? Well, I guess you shouldn't offer it, but if you have, but
no, I mean, I don't. That's one thing about like the stuff that I do, and kind of why I created my YouTube channel was I don't have any secrets. Like, if somebody sends me a message like, "Hey, how do you do this?" I'll tell them. I honestly wish everyone made their own stuff. Like, it's just that much better. But no, spinner baits, I feel like outside of like the swivel that you use to attach to the blades, and then some people are very specific on the brand of blades, like the Hildebrand blades are probably what everybody recommends. But outside of that, really the only thing that you can tweak would be the hook and then the wire diameter. So if you use a smaller wire diameter, you're going to get more flex. And then obviously stiffer, you won't. So outside of those two, I mean, there's really not a lot to customize unless, I mean, you could go like 2 blade, 3 blade, have however many blades you want. But I feel like a lot of that's just personal preference. I typically just make a standard. I use a little bit lighter wire than a lot of people. and I just use a double willow blade. That's pretty much my go-to. I don't get crazy with them.
There is one that I'm curious about because I've seen you make it, and I haven't seen too much since. Your A-rigs.
Yes.
How's that going?
Phenomenal. So the A-rig is one of those things where, like, I love them because the same exact thing. I can use a lighter wire and it's going to flex a lot more every time you twitch the rod. So, like, all your baits come in and flow back out. And yeah, I've caught a lot of fish. That's what I throw a lot in the wintertime. But the thing with A-rigs is it's so much work that goes into it to make them. That's why I don't even try to sell them. Because if you factored in like the time that it took that goes into each one of them, yeah, if somebody asks me, most of the time I just recommend them to go buy whatever their favorite A-rig is.
Go buy a Hog Farmer. Go buy
Yeah.
the
Picasso,
Berkeley one.
Yeah.
No,
Picasso.
the Yum.
Yum.
Yum is where it's at.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yum
So-
Flash Mob Junior, baby.
That's
Yeah.
what I used for the longest time. And then, yeah, I actually bought the A-rig mold just because they were impossible to find. And I found one, I think it was on eBay or something. So I bought it just so I could have it. And I had it for, I don't know, probably 6 months before I ever even messed with it. So I bought a bunch of different wire diameters and all the different stuff and just kind of started playing around with it. And yeah, and I made a video on that too, just teaching, because I had so many people asking me about selling them and this. I'm like, look, I'll teach you everything. You can make your own.
That's a bad business model. What are you doing,
I
Jacob?
know.
You should
I
just be
know.
selling these products. What's going on here?
I know. If I had more time, I would, but that's my problem is I'm pretty strict on time, or limited on time. So yeah, it's stuff like that. Because a lot of times when people reach out to custom lure makers, they don't want just like one thing. They're like, oh, I want to go ahead and order, because you save on shipping cost. And
Yeah.
if somebody wanted to order 5 umbrella rigs, I mean it's going to take me several hours to go, because every single wire, like I start with just plain wire shafts and I bend every single loop, and it's very time consuming.
Yeah,
And you got to crimp everything. If you
Mhm.
want blades, you got to put all the blades on. It's like probably 2 hours in A-rig pretty much to make one by hand yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Yeah.
factor in it takes you 20 minutes just to plug your lead pot in and get the lead melted. And then when you powder coat, like that's another 25, 30 minutes. So there's a lot of things, especially if somebody just somebody were to message me and order one A-rig. Well, you've got an hour in just melting your lead and powder coating. So if you factored in, let's say I made $5 an hour making lures, people don't want to pay what it would actually cost to make it. So they're like, oh, it cost me $50 for an A-rig, and they just don't want to do it. So it's easier to just avoid that altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I ran into that problem when I started making jigs.
Yeah.
It's extremely time consuming. Unless you
Mhm.
really enjoy it, or you're really trying to cut on costs and you're doing it for yourself,
Mhm.
production wise, it really doesn't make much sense.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I
the cost-
primarily just make stuff for like me. I don't actually advertise and try to sell stuff hardly ever. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if somebody like message me, I'm more than willing to do it, but yeah, I don't advertise it or try to push it just because of the time constraints.
Well, I need some ounce and a quarter spinner baits. If you have an ounce and a quarter spinner bait mold.
I don't think I have one that heavy. I don't think I do.
A 1 ounce.
I think I do have a 1 ounce, but yeah, I don't think I have ounce. I don't know if I have anything over 1 ounce. Yeah, like I don't fish super deep water, so I've never really felt the need for me personally to have anything that heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I
But
think
yeah.
that's about the one thing he doesn't have, because we do have some of like the fresh and salty crew here. So they make a lot of those like 1 to 6 ounces. I think is about the cutoff there for bottom bouncing and like all the hot dog baits and stuff. So he doesn't have anything like that, but I mean, pretty much damn near anything you can think of bass fishing related. My God. I mean, I can't even begin to list all the things I bought from you over the years at this point.
Yeah,
Probably.
we'll have to get off air. Once we get off air, I do need some 1 ounce and 3/4 ounce spinnerbaits. It's more of off air stuff. This stuff doesn't apply to anybody that's listening. It doesn't work
Yeah.
anywhere. I'm just as Jacob said, I'm just trial and error here, so it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
But-
if I had to say a staple that I buy a lot, Flick Shake stuff. I buy a lot of the hooks for it from him. I buy a boatload of the worms. I actually bought him a mold and sent it to him and was like, make me some baits. And I've been jacking him up on it ever since. So that's something. And then obviously jigs on jigs on jigs. I mean, I wouldn't even know, but several hundred at this point.
For sure.
And
Yeah. The other thing that I feel like is a little bit different about like the way I do things compared to a lot of people is a lot of people that have the like custom jig name, I guess you could call it, or custom lures, they'll have like a strict website and it's just like Tackle Warehouse. You can get on their website and they have this bait in this color and this size, and that's pretty much it. Whereas like I don't keep anything like in stock. I don't keep baits hung up on the shelves. Like anything anybody wants is after they order it is made right then. And even like Joseph can attest to this. I'm pretty willing to do like I've bought molds and hooks just specifically for Joseph. Like if somebody messaged me and they're like, "Hey, I'm looking for this," like I had a buddy of mine just the other day. He was looking for a shaky head, and he wanted one that didn't have the screw lock. It had the actual lead keeper. And he's like, I want this in 3/16 and a 5/0 Gamakatsu hook. He's like, that's exactly what I want. So the next time I made an order for supplies, I grabbed that mold, I grabbed that hook, and like I try to accommodate as best as I can. The soft plastic side of things is a little more difficult because, like I said, that Kitech mold that I have is $500. So it's like, well, I can't really go do that for everybody, but I try to accommodate as best as I can.
We need to find. Can we just end the show so I can put in my order? Dude, I need it by like my holiday starts this weekend, so I would be fishing next New Year's. So I need it by like New Year's. But that's besides the point.
But yeah, I mean, to that point too, though, like you did that YouTube video on Kitech jigs, right? Because that's like I feel like when we talk about custom bait making and jigs in general, everybody wants a Kitech jig. It's just everywhere. It does so well. It catches fish. So when you customize that mold to be able to make, some of those smaller jigs and that compact profile, that was pretty cool. And then me being me, I like hooks, like Jacob and I share the same sentiment. We're a big fan of owner hooks. We like what they do. So I'm all about making sure that I've got owner hooks and everything. And, all my personal jigs now, I actually have a couple of them from him that have the owner deep throat hook, which I haven't really seen commercially available yet anywhere. And I love that hook. And then the other thing is now on my Kitech hooks, a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with the owner hook that I use, which is their ball head hook. So the standard ball head jig hook that you would buy for like your A-rigs or swim baits, or even I'm presuming, I haven't used it yet, but the Range Rover roller or whatever probably has a pretty similar hook. And I love it because it doesn't break like the Kitech jig hook does. It's super fine wire. So if I want to throw a jig on 10-pound tests or 12-pound tests, I can.
So I'm going to kind of throw this up there. Why owner hook specifically for you, Jacob? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So what I noticed when you buy, I'm sure you saw it. I don't know how many jig hooks you bought when you made your own jigs, but if you buy a box of 100 hooks and you start going through it, and I'm not going to say other brands because everybody has their preference, but the consistency, the sharpness, and the durability of owner hooks are far superior, in my personal opinion. And that's not to say that they're the only thing I use, because I actually use a lot of Mustad hooks. If there's a jig that I like, that because Owner, their hook selection is a little limited compared to other brands. So I still use other brands if I need to, but I try to stick to Owner hooks just because I feel like the actual quality of the hook is better.
No, I can attest to that. When I started making jigs, I mean, I'll throw the brands out there, but I started, because I started using Mustads because Mustad, it was
Mhm.
essentially when you buy your Do It mold, they
Mhm.
recommend a Mustad hook to pour your jigs with,
Mhm.
and they work fine. A hook is a hook; it works fine. But as you said, sometimes you get inconsistent hooks, whether it's
Mhm.
not sharpened all the way and you have to fine tune it, resharpen it, or say the hook is already bent out
Mhm.
once you set the hook, it just lays over. But
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
this
it's
one. Oh, go ahead.
oh, sorry. It's interesting that you mentioned that. So I don't know if you've looked at Do It molds recently, but they're
yeah,
starting. It's almost like they're trying to align all of their stuff with Victory hooks. So like
interesting.
they've come out with a couple molds in the last, I'd say, year and a half, that Victory makes a specific hook that's the only hook that works in that mold unless you
Mhm.
modify the mold. So that's what I do. Like there's some of the molds that I really like it, but I'm not a fan of Victory hooks. I've had so many of them come in brand new where the hook point's rolled or the hook is already bent, like not even in a mold. So yeah, I'll modify my mold before I use a Victory hook if I can get away with it.
This is just me being me. But the other thing that really sells me on Owner is, again, I can't show you because this hook is too fine. But one thing you'll notice when you go look at some of the higher, you're not gonna. It's way too fine. Um,
I figured I'd
thank,
try.
thanks for showing everybody my ugly mug. You just wanted to see my Beretta jacket so you can be
Yeah, we
funny.
just wanted a close up.
Yeah, just in case.
Um, the barb, like when you
Mhm.
get some of those cheaper hooks, you'll see that the barb location, how much it's cut into the shank, all that stuff is really like odd. Like some of them are really close to the hook point, some of them are further back, some of them are really big barbs, some of them are really small barbs. And one thing I'll notice immediately when I pick up an Owner hook is the barb is almost exactly the same size in exactly the same spot. And why that would ever matter to anybody is I've had some of the Victory hooks or other ones break right at the barb because it was cut too deep. You go to set the hook, you break the hook point, you don't notice it if you don't check it right away, and you go 3, 4, 5 fish before you realize that you broke your hook point off. Done that plenty of times. So that's part of it. Um, I don't mind like Gamakatsu, but Gamakatsu hooks tend to be really expensive. Like
Very
that's
expensive.
that's the one
Mhm.
thing that turns me off of them is like
Hmm.
if you want to order, something through him and you say a Ned, right? That's something I buy a bajillion of from him. If you buy a Ned and you use a Gamakatsu hook, it's like $1 more for the
Hmm.
hook on top of the jig just for a Gamakatsu hook versus like the Owner one. Owner hooks tend to be significantly cheaper than a lot of the other brands that are out there that are also high quality, even though it's at that same level of quality. I mean, even when you purchase Owner hooks yourself, like if you were to go out and buy their EWG hooks versus Gamakatsu, they're a little bit cheaper, same quality. Or what's the other one that people love right now? Is it Ryugi or something that's getting really popular, and BKK
Ye-
and all of them?
Yeah,
Hmm.
there's a lot of
They're
hooks out there.
they're getting way more expensive though. A
Hmm.
pack of
Oh yeah.
5 worm hooks is like $7.99, but Owner is
Yep.
still $3.99 for a 5 pack, and
Hmm.
has been
Speak-
forever.
Speaking of which, if Damien, if you're watching, I still have your pack of drop shot hooks. Let me know. I want to get them back to you. Sorry, I had to throw
Yeah,
that out there.
yeah. BKK is actually starting to come out with jig hooks to pour like in lead molds. I haven't bought any yet to try them out, but I know they're starting to come out with some of those.
Nice. They
Yep.
make good stuff. I'm not going to say they don't.
Hmm.
I've got a couple of their hooks.
I've used their treble hooks before. I haven't used any of their just like jig hooks, but I liked the treble hooks that I used.
The BKKs you were saying?
Yep.
Interesting.
I
I
wouldn't say
mean,
that I like them more or less than because I like the ST36s typically.
yeah,
So like I'm not gonna say that I like them better, but I did like them.
interesting. Yeah, because I'm a huge fan of the 54s and the 56 for my LV500s,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically all I use is a triple grip.
Yep.
And I don't have any issues. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting that you say BKKs are not bad. I'm gonna have to try them just to try it. It never
Yep.
hurts. Yeah.
I haven't
Even
used any of
Fusion.
the larger sizes. I think size 8 was like the biggest I tried of the BKK. So as far as like the smaller trebles, I really liked them, but I can't speak on the larger sizes.
Yeah, so like on your jerk bait
Mhm.
style of hooks, a
Yep.
jerk bait or blade bait kind of deal, those smaller
Yep.
hooks.
Yep.
Yeah.
I tried them on the Tiny Clash. They're all right in the 1/0
Mm.
size. They're pretty sharp. They're kind of like an in between of the ST36 and the 56. I think it is right. The 56 the 3X and the 36 is the 1X.
36 is 1X, the 54 is a 2X, and I believe the 56 is a 3X. I believe.
Whichever is the thicker of the round bend that's similar to the 36. It's like in between the two of them. It's not quite like it's like a 1.5X. I think that's the S21 that I was using in a 1/0. And then I have the Titan Rider hooks. I don't like the Titan Rider hooks that much, to be honest with you.
I feel like we're speaking alien right now. We're just naming a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, yeah, we're going way too
543A.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
that's ultimately lure making in a nutshell, though. Like, that's like, when people ask you, like, how, I'm sure, Max, if you made jigs, you see it. Like, when people are like, well, what colors do you offer? I'm like, pick a color, I'll make it. Like,
Yeah.
if you give people all of the options, they just start to get, they can't focus. So, yeah, I mean, that's lure making in general.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why anybody that I tell to start jig fishing is literally brown and purple, black and blue, and green pumpkin.
Yep.
Just stick with that and go fish. Because
Yep.
if you're gonna customize all the colors, there's so many color patterns you can go
Mhm.
with jig skirt. There's like,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what, like 1,000 different types of colors. There's like 7 different types of skirt materials, as in like barbed wire and
Mhm.
everything else, solid colors.
even
Yeah.
down to texture. They make textured
Yeah.
silicone now, which is like
Yeah.
mind-boggling. But
Mhm.
I mean, where I get on with color and stuff, like I'm sure Jacob will attest to this because I'm probably one of his pickier customers when it comes to making stuff. I just like something slightly different, and again, all
Mhm.
mine are like tried and true, right? So like, brown and purple. This is my brown and purple jig, right? It's got black top instead of a traditional brown and purple, and it's got kind of a peanut butter bottom, but it's still rubber black, brown, and purple. And I use that way more than I ever pick up something like this, which is what Max is talking about. Your standard brown and purple. I just have way more confidence in something that's slightly different in presenting fish that have seen a brown and purple jig or have seen a straight green pumpkin jig, just something slightly different. Even my green pumpkin jigs, I always throw black on the back to give it a little bit darker top silhouette, or I do something slightly different just because I guess I need to be different. I'm a hipster. I don't know.
You were born a little bit different, Joseph.
I'm special. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's what my
No
mom
doubt
said.
about that.
Yeah. I mean, you go on these great epic rants, so you're a little bit different, Joseph. Just a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah, and that's one
Yeah.
of the things. If people are ever like thinking about making lures to sell, that's the side of it you got to shut off. Like, I've made stuff for people that I'm like, I would never throw that. That is horrible, but that's what they want, and they've got confidence in it. So you gotta find that balance. And if people ask me, I'll give them their recommendation and be like, no, I don't like that. They're like, that's what I want. Okay.
What
So
you got,
yeah.
Bobby Lee? I know you was trying to say something, Bobby Lee. What you got?
No, I just had a question for Jacob.
Mhm.
So Taz had mentioned this, Taz 559 bait and tackle. He had mentioned this before, and I wanted to ask you the same question. Are you seeing any difference as long as you've been making baits? Have you seen any kind of discoloring in any of the pores or any of the skirts that you've been getting, or are they pretty consistent?
If you buy like quality stuff, I have no issues. Like I might still have some. I made some. Now they're horrible because they're the first baits I made. But I have some stick baits somewhere that look exactly the same as I think I started making baits in 2018, and they look exactly the same. It's the same with skirt material. Like you know how like if you leave skirt material in a 3700 box on the deck of your boat, 6 months later it's dry rotted and falling apart.
Yep.
I keep all of mine covered, no sunlight, no nothing. Yeah, I've got jig skirts. The jigs I haven't been making as long, but I've got jig skirts probably 3, 4 years old that no, they look brand new. It's all about like how you store them.
Gotcha.
Um, I store all my stuff like in a climate controlled area where the sun's not beating on it. And yeah, I don't have any issues.
Cool.
I think I think that's what a lot of tournament anglers do really bad is storing baits.
Mhm.
Because you're such in a rush, you cut it off and you just throw it there, and then you go
Mhm.
fishing, and then like at the end of the day, it's just laying there, and you
If
Yeah.
don't pick it up either.
anybody's had the pleasure of seeing Damien Tao's junk box after a day of fishing,
Yeah, yeah,
feels better every time because
yeah.
every time I see him get off the water, I'm like, holy shit, that would take me 3 hours to untangle. What did you do today? And it's
Yeah.
like that every time. And that's why he wins because he
Yeah.
fishes fucking everything.
Hey, Bob.
Big
Hey,
Z
Bob.
in the
Hey, Bob.
house.
I'm
All right.
surprised nobody's dropping any questions
Yeah, nobody's
before
asking
we.
anything.
Yeah. No
Yeah,
questions? Anybody?
nobody has any questions. You guys
I
suck,
I do
viewers.
actually have more questions because I can't shut up, and you know that. Um, what would be your recommendation for a kit of somebody who wants to get started? Where would you point them to try to get into making lures at home?
For soft plastics or jigs?
Just in general, whatever you would recommend to somebody who wants to start making stuff for themselves.
Well, for soft or for jigs, I'll start there because it's easier. Um, Do It Molds kind of has the lead molds. Kind of, I don't know. They're like the only ones I guess you could get stuff from. So I would start there with, and the biggest thing with starting is you have to buy something that you throw. Like if you only throw soft plastics, don't go buy a football head mold and start making jigs. So you have to buy whatever you use the most. Go buy if you're doing lead, I would say just buy like two molds because, like I said, they're 45, $50 a piece, whatever they are. Look at when it comes to lead, the biggest thing is it's kind of intimidating when you start looking at what hooks and components to buy for your jigs. Just look at the angle of the hook eye and the wire diameter. So, whatever hook they recommend, if you match it with your favorite brand, you can go that route. I would kind of like what Max was saying, don't go overboard with colors. I couldn't even tell you how many colors and of everything, and I find myself throwing a green pumpkin jig all the time. So keep it
True.
super simple. And then the same with soft plastics. I would, if you're just making it for yourself, get the cast aluminum molds. They're way cheaper. They may not be as shiny, but they're going to fish exactly the same. If you want to step up to like your CNC aluminum molds, one of my favorite mold manufacturers is called Hog Salad Bait Molds. And you can buy like lower cavity count. So you can buy a 2 cavity mold for a little over $100. Like you don't have to buy the high cavity count and make a bunch at once. So yeah, I would, and the same with that, I'd buy maybe 4 or 5 different colors, like a black, green pumpkin, chartreuse, white, and then maybe a brown, and you can kind of make just about anything with that. But yeah, the biggest thing with making it in general is keep it simple. Like A bottle of color for soft plastics is going to be anywhere from $5 to $8, and I probably have 400 bottles of color in my shop right now. And just like with everything else, I reach back to green pumpkin all the time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a trap. Like when you start, it's how it was for me when I was starting to make jigs. I would go through a catalog and I'd see all these jig skirt
Yeah.
colors, and I'm like, "Ooh, I need that. I need that."
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, I use the same, 4 or 5 colors. So keeping it simple, and it's hard to do because we all channel that inner kid, and we're like, "Oh, I want this. I want that."
Let me try
But
that. Yeah.
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 It's like walking into a tackle shop where you see a bunch of baits.
Mhm.
You're like, I want to try that for that, and that color looks good.
Yep.
Yep.
Bob.
There was
Oh, sorry. Bob had a question here. Bob Zane. Why don't they ever put a punch hook in a lead jig head?
I mean, you could, but the hard. I'm assuming he's talking about like a straight shank flipping hook.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
assuming so.
Think
That's
so.
going to be your issue. Is the hook eye is straight, where
Mhm.
typically like your lead molds are going to have like a 45 or 90-degree angle, and those flipping hooks are just straight out. So it'd be pretty difficult. I mean, you could modify a mold fairly easy and do that if you wanted just a straight hook. But I would say that's probably the biggest reason is just because that hook just goes straight out. It doesn't bend.
Don't quote me on it, but I believe the closest thing to it would be like a grass swim jig, right? Or like a punching jig. That'll probably be the closest thing to what Bob is looking for, as in a 0 degree
Probably.
line tie jig. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I don't know. It'd be tough because
Yeah.
I mean the A-rig mold, for instance, like it uses a straight hook eye, like the line ties
Mhm.
on the very front. So I guess you could try to modify like that mold. Um, but yeah, it'd be tricky.
Well, what are you using that application for, Bob? Are you trying to snag fish on live scope or something, Bob? Is
yeah,
that why you're
straight.
looking? Is that why you're looking for that?
He's over here. I need like a 3/0 punch and a 1/8 and 1/16 ounce head because he fucking does. No, I think I know what he's using it for. He wants it for swim baits. He wants a heavy duty hook
Mm,
that's lightweight that he can embed in and top hook.
mm.
But he does have a question. I mean, there was one earlier for dead on and bait plastics. I think you can answer that one. And
Yeah,
then-
here it is. Dead on or bait plastics.
So I've used both of them. All trying to keep it like all. I have my personal preference. If you're hand pouring a lot, go with dead on plastics, but you're gonna need a vacuum chamber. The bubbles in that plastisol, because that dead on plastics, you have to mix a lot more than other brands, and the more you mix it, the more you incorporate like air and bubbles. So you need some sort of vacuum chamber to get rid of the bubbles. And then I use bait plastics because I primarily inject. So if you're doing a lot of injection, I would recommend bait plastics. And if you're hand pouring a lot, then dead on. And the reason is dead on plastics is workable at a lower temperature. So you have to cook the plastisol up to 350 degrees for it to actually thermally convert to where it'll solidify. And then you actually inject most of the time around like 310, 315. And bait plastics at that temperature is a thicker consistency, which is preferable for injecting because the thicker you can inject, the cleaner it's going to be if you're making like 2-color laminates. The colors aren't going to mix as much. They're actually going to stay and you'll have the clean laminate lines. Whereas dead on plastics, it's workable. Like if you're hand pouring, it's easier to pour at lower temperatures. So it's kind of just easier to use. So yeah,
And-
I mean they're both fine, but that would be what I would recommend. If you're hand pouring a lot, dead on. If you're injecting, bait plastics.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
a cheat for dead on because that's what I use because I have mostly open pour. If you cook it and then keep it warm for a while, it'll degas itself, but it takes like 15, 20 minutes of sitting in the
Mhm.
microwave on its own to degas and be usable.
Yep.
So just pay attention to that. Unless you want to vacuum chamber. If you vacuum chamber it, then it's fine
Mhm.
right away. If you don't vacuum chamber it, you got to cook it for a while and let it stay hot.
Yeah, when
Um,
you cook it in your microwave, just don't open the door. Just let it sit
Yep,
in the
just
microwave for 20, 30 seconds and then reheat it for another 10, let it sit. And yeah, you can slowly work them out like that.
that's the only way I've ever been able to work
Yep.
with dead-on plastics myself. So it takes me a really long time to make stuff, which is why I don't do it very often. And the only reason I have stuff to make is because eventually I'd like to make big swim baits, but I just haven't had the time, or realistically, I haven't spent the $700 I need to spend on a 3D printer to start making masters. So I don't have to carve because I do know CAD, and I would much rather do that.
So I'm just gonna throw this out there simply just because I'm curious, because it's much easier to ask Bob on here on air than it is to message Bob. I'm I'm assuming Bob Zhang is getting this hook to make it similar to like how the
Core
Bass
tackle.
Mafia, no, the Bass Mafia, their version of the mag draft, where it's that hook that comes out. I'm
The
assuming
dangerous.
that's the dangerous swim bait. I'm assuming that's why you need that punch hook, right, Bob? And then we'll jump to a question. It's just I wanted to ask Bob that real quick because I'm just genuinely curious. Kenny here is asking, what color did you make from that you didn't like? And Poor does indeed look like Bobby Lee, just tiger, no belly.
I'll quit it.
No, all the jigs I made for him were really like natural colors, I would say. So yeah, all the jigs that he bought were good.
I'm the weirdo.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. What's your least favorite color that I made you make for me?
I don't. Are you talking soft plastics or jigs?
Jigs. I've made you tie a bunch of weird colors.
Yeah, I haven't disliked any of them, but the ones that have like 5 or 6 different colors in them, those are just really time consuming. But no, I haven't disliked any of the colors that I've made. Not that I can remember anyway.
Yeah, I have tried the Margarita Mutilator jig.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yep.
I've caught 3 fish on it. That's it. So we went back to brown and purple. And then bright pink, believe it or not, works really well. Spotted bass like a pink jig. A lot.
Yeah, spotted bass are, I don't know what it is about pink and spotted bass, but a buddy of mine at Berryessa was throwing like a morning dawn swim bait that he made, and every fish he caught was a spotted bass. I'd be catching largies and smallies in the same boat with him. Every fish he caught was a spotted bass. There's something about pink.
Interesting.
Great.
So next,
You're gonna be buying pink stuff now.
I mean, I already have pink Crocs. So
what's crazy
what do you guys
is like,
do?
I'll talk to my buddy that does the trout stuff up on like Maloney's and Pedro, and they're trolling hoochies in like 85 feet right now for cokes and all that stuff, and he's still catching spotted bass on pink hoochies, 85 feet of water.
Yeah, I mean, spotted bass live down there, though.
Yeah.
I mean, I caught a spotted bass in 110 foot of water on the bottom. So.
But anyway, answer Bob's question.
Yeah, sorry. Here you go, Bob. Is there any trick to pouring with heavy salt? Its baits are just too brutal when they come out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much salt he's considering heavy salt, but you can either go to a firmer blend of plastic, or you can buy a bottle of hardener and add hardener to your plastic salt, because the salt's going to make it brittle. And it's kind of like you have to find that happy medium. The more hardener you add, the less action you're going to get out of your bait. So like a stick bait, for instance, you can't make a stick bait that like wiggles and shimmies really good on the fall without being brittle. Like there's just no way to do it, because you need that soft plastic and the salt content to get that shimmy. Whereas like say a creature bait, you can get away with a little bit firmer of a plastic, and still get the action because the appendages on the claws or whatever it is are going to make that action happen. So yeah, a lot of it's just going to have to be a harder plastic or less salt. You just have to find that happy meat. There's really no way to make a heavily salted soft bait that isn't brittle.
Yeah, mine haven't like been brittle per se, but they tear like Yamamoto's.
Mhm.
And I have found that when I wanted to like, because I mean I don't know if everybody knows, but I kind of got really into the Yamatanuki for a while, and may or may not have bought way too many Yamatanuki knockoff molds, just to try a couple of different things. But when I wanted to make like a heavyweight scat style bait, popcorn salt was my best friend. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically fine salt. I found that I could get about the same weight as the Yamatanuki doing that, and it would stay the same, except it tore like Yamamoto.
Mhm.
Right? I'd still get good wiggle and action and softness to it, but it just... There's a reason Yamamoto blows out on anything and everything. It's because it's so full of salt, and there's just really no way around it. It splits, it tears, it does whatever.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's cool about like making soft plastics. I actually prefer my soft plastics a little softer than a lot of people. And if I only catch one fish per bait, I don't care. Like I'm catching fish. So if it's stuff that I'm making myself, I don't care if it's one fish a bait, because I can always make more.
Well,
Or
when
melt
you're
it down.
making,
Hmm?
yeah, or when you
Or-
make your own bait too, though, it's
Yeah.
much cheaper.
Yep.
Yep.
So yeah, I catch one fish in that Cinco, but it only cost me like 5 cents to make that one Cinco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then you can remelt too is the other thing.
Mhm.
Like,
Exactly.
you know,
Mhm.
pick on not necessarily a stick bait because I feel like it's hard to replicate a Senko, but
Mhm.
I don't know what's a good, like a drop shot worm. I mean, you're never going to get the same colors that Robo Worm does. They're just that good at that hand pouring technique, and nobody really has time for that because God, that would be hours and hours and hours. But you know, if you could get into a solid green pumpkin drop shot worm bite, if you get one fish on that, whatever, you just throw it in a pile, it's all torn up, melt it down later, and you've got endless green pumpkin from one batch that you've made. So that is kind of cool. And even when I don't, you know, like if I keep all my soft plastics, I got a giant bag, I'll melt it all down and I'll make South Africa color, which is just
Black.
all your shit with black.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it still catches fish. It smells terrible. Like if you've ever remelted a Kitech, oh my god, dude, don't do that when the wife is home because she'll think you brought home roadkill.
There's something in it. I think it burns. I don't know what it. There's something in Kitech soft plastics that, because if you look really close, it almost looks like like a dark brown, like something burnt. But yeah, it's bad.
I
It's
made
worse
that
than power
mistake.
bait.
I made that mistake once, and then I made a batch of Yamatanukis out of it, and it caught the crap out of fish, but I couldn't be anywhere near that bait.
So Sean's got a couple of questions here. We'll roll through them. Oddest color that works for any bait that you've adjusted to or you made. Oddest color.
I don't know about odd, but just solid black. Like I feel like a lot of people, because a lot of people stick with like your green pumpkins or your browns or what. But I've been really, because Joseph talks about like remelting all your old stuff. That's what I used to do, is just throw it all in a pile, dump a bunch of black pigment in it, and just drowned out all the other colors. And yeah, I've caught a ton of fish on just and everything. Like he said, swim baits, like worms, you name it, like just solid black.
Black.
That's the only thing I can think of that works across the board.
Yeah.
Because
And
like we
then-
talked about pink for spotted bass, like I would throw pink
Yeah.
for everything and for spotted bass except a jig. I'm probably not throwing a pink jig all that much. I know they work, but I don't do it.
I do.
And then this so Sean's asking, have you ever put any silicone skirt material in plastic baits? So in other words, have
Dice.
you made an Yeah, a dice. Yeah, I mean, even
Uh,
Joey Sylvia is asking the same thing. Are dice modes a thing?
They are. So Epic Bait Molds just released dice molds, I think last week or the week before. And they made one of them's a half inch, and then the other one's, I think, 0.7 inches. So basically 3/4 of an inch. But you have to put the silicone strands through by hand manually. There's not a mold that you can lay the silicone in the mold, close it, and inject. So everything, that's why the OSP dice are so expensive, because I don't know how they do theirs, but yeah, you have to do all that manually. I personally don't do it, just because of the time consuming thing. There are so many other baits out there that I'll throw on a drop shot before I throw a dice and strand silicone through it. Like, I know they work. It's not something I do.
I did it. It was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
It took me 20 plus minutes per soft plastic lure to make at home. So I poured the Yamatanuki molds that I have in heavy salt, just like you would get it, and I cut it into rounds. And then I threaded through about 20 strands. I've got one in the garage. I'll go grab it and just give me a second. But it took me, if I included pouring the bait, cutting it, and making it, it would probably be in the 35 minutes per bait. And if you want to talk about time, like OSP $20 for a pack of 4 versus 35 minutes of bait in my time, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
$20 is sounding pretty good right about now. Especially
Yeah,
since it's going to take me 2 hours to make 4 of them. Yeah, no.
Yeah, if people want to see it, they could just search Epic Bait
gonna go
Molds
grab
Lucky
one.
Dice. I think Lucky Dice is what they called their mold, and there's, I don't know, there's probably 4 or 5 channels that have shown that mold on YouTube. But yeah, you just have, I think the mold makes, it's either 10 or 12 dice per injection. But yeah, just manually stringing that silicone through is just, it's really time consuming. So I don't personally do it. It's just not a technique that I use enough to feel like I want to do that. So
Yeah.
because everything that I make, and even like the videos that I make, I don't make stuff just like for content. Like everything I'm making, it's stuff that I'm gonna go put in my boat and I'm gonna use. So yeah, I don't personally do it.
Well, there you go. That's your dice questions for the guys that want
Nice
to fish
guys.
and dice. Yeah, I still can't get bid on it. I've
Yeah,
grown it. Yeah.
I've never even used it. There's certain baits that really draw you in. That's just not been one of them for me. So, and especially at that price, I never tried it.
There you go. There is my little dice. So as you can see, it looks kind of like a Yamatanuki that's been cut up, which you could probably do at home if you wanted to. And then some silicone skirt. I have jacked him up on it. This one bait probably caught, I don't know, 30 fish at Clear Lake. But yeah, the time and effort, not worth it. And then when I keep saying a pink jig, I gotta plug the man here, N2TW Custom Lures here. Everything about this is custom, but I get my Katana Craw, which again is probably one of my favorite jig trailers. I hate that I'm sharing this, but anyway. And there is my Spotted Bass Killer pink jig. You put 2 and 2 together, and you have a really good time on Maloney's. Several 50-plus fish days on this jig combination out there. But you didn't hear it from me.
Juice.
Yeah. And for people new to lure making, that's a good example. So that Katana Craw is a cast aluminum mold. So the bait's not going to be super shiny. And a lot of people, just because of content creators and whatever they read online, they kind of shy away from the cast molds because they're not shiny. But Joseph and myself, like, that is probably my number one jig trailer. And it's a cheap mold. Like, it's not expensive. Yeah, the baits aren't shiny, and every once in a while the antenna won't fill in all the way, but I don't care. It still catches fish. There's just something about that profile that's and it works on like compact and finesse jigs, I probably wouldn't throw it on a full size jig. It's just a little bit too small for that.
No, it's definitely a finesse jig, but what's so cool about it is it's so thick. You know, it's
Mhm.
like such a meaty thing. It's you know, like it almost looks like a Ned, you know,
Mhm.
when you pull all the appendages off, it's kind of got thick and bulbous. But
I think they actually designed that as a Ned rig bait.
is that what it's
Just-
for?
I think so.
Joseph likes them thick and bulbous.
Rar.
Yeah, because
But-
that craw is only 3
Oh,
inches.
dear.
Like, it's not a big bait. It's only 3 inches long, so it's pretty small.
Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to plug him on that. But that is one of the ridiculous baits, and he even went all out and made the powder coat like stunningly beautiful to match. As you said, it probably doesn't matter, but if you've got confidence in it, you've got confidence in it. So,
Yep.
and I catch a crap ton of fish on a pink jig. So,
Fair enough.
I gotta
Um,
try pink now.
Is there anything else you guys want to add on here before we lose the attention span of everybody else that's watching us? Because we're just here, jerking off.
I got to get going anyway, so it's a perfect time for me.
Yeah. So
3 inches, I heard is average.
yeah, 3 inches. I heard is average. I believe it's 5. And there's a lot of after dark comments that's happening right now. If guys don't pay attention, there isn't community hole after dark,
Yeah,
and these are after dark comments. They really are.
this is the regular show, guys.
But with that though, Joseph, did you want to talk about the giveaway, sir? Since you're kind of heading away with the giveaway.
So again, courtesy of Jacob here, I've kind of done some fine tuning and some tweaking over some time here, and putting together a jig package that I'm gonna open up for everyone to essentially win a chance. There's no pink, don't worry. Basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna run a month-long event. To enter to win this jig box. It's probably going to be around 30 jigs, so something like $200 worth of jigs. We're going to do a cast to catch during the month of January. I'm going to release a code. That code's got to either be said verbally, or it's got to be shown on your hand or a piece of paper. You want to measure the fish, whatever it is. But just a cast to catch, tag the community hole in it. We'll do a random drawing of everybody that enters, and one lucky person will get a full box of some jigs hand tied by yours truly here, courtesy of the community hole, and trying to get people out in January because it's jig season in January.
Yes, sir.
So
we'll make
thanks
a fuss
again,
about
Jacob, for supplying all the materials. You know, he made this is my preferred finesse jig. You know, this is my ball head jig, light wire hook, light, you know, kind of weed guard combination. And I really love it. But I also throw a jig on a lighter rod with 12-pound to 15-pound test when I'm fishing a finesse jig. I do like that combination. So hopefully you like them too. Slaving away over here, tying them up for you. There's going to be quite a few of them in the box, and then some other surprises as well. It'll be a pretty worthwhile box. So get out on the water, go fishing, make some content, tag us in it, get fishing. Really is the moral of it. It's cold, I know, but you can catch some good jig fish in January.
Oh yeah.
And that's that.
Yep.
So with that, stay on after we end the show here, Jacob. I have a special order if you don't mind sticking on. But with that, we're gonna end tonight's session, everyone. Thanks for tuning in our wildly different show, you could say. Still revolves fishing, but something different.
Thanks again, Jacob, for being here. We really appreciate you setting
Thanks,
aside
Jacob.
some time and hanging out with the guys.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night, everyone.